Guys, I'm laying on an IED. Move away now. I can still feel the bullets whizzing past my face. You can hear them ricocheting all around you, and you're just like, I'm just a lucky son of a bitch.
Today's guest had one of, if not the, most dangerous job in the military. As a former special operations engineer, his role was to search and find IEDs, deploying twice to Afghanistan with Australian Special Forces. On this episode, he shares the experiences he went through, the mistakes he's made, and more importantly, the lessons he learned along the way. His aim is to prevent others from languishing needlessly and to shed light on the true strength and power of vulnerability. Episode 123, Nathan Bolton. The One Moment Please podcast.
Yeah.
I read your book, and I tell you, the acknowledgements had me going. I was like, oh, God, pass the tissues now, Jesus. I was like, this is going to be a good one.
No! Oh, good gosh.
I have never, honestly, read a book that is so brutally raw about someone's own mental health journey. So most people in a book, they just sort of skim over it. It was a dark time, whatever. But you go in talking about the beast. It was remarkable.
No, it's it was literally 3,500 of some of the most. I'd done a lot of the work in order to even be able to sit there and actually write a book in the first place. But it was probably the most traumatizing 3,500 hours of my life. Trying to sit there,
3,500 hours. Wow.
Yeah, wade through and then write it. Well, it first started as a journal, then turned into a manuscript, then turned into obviously something for general readership. It never actually was written for public viewing. It was everyone else telling me, no, you got to bring this out. And I'm like, no! And it sat in the depths of my computer. It's inside the computer for like ages.
What if it was so traumatizing? Why did you write it?
I'm an ordinary dude who's been through shit, and I guess along the way, I've learned so much, especially coming from a very rigid stoic view to understanding what vulnerability means and what true courage. Hence why I state that it took more courage for me to stand firm on the battlefield than it ever did. No, it took more courage to face my demons than it ever did to stand firm on the battlefield. Because in the end, I'm like, the things that you tell yourself, like that is the stuff of true nightmares. And I did almost get closer to killing myself than that ever did happen in that war. And I wrote it because I had learned so much of the last 10 years of my life moving from stoicism to vulnerability. And I'm like, for me, I just wanted to create a coherent narrative in order to allow myself to better understand my own journey. Hence why I wrote the book. I don't want people to learn about me. I want people to read my journey and learn about themselves, and pass on the blazing mistakes that are so simple in theory and concept that I made that I want others to be able to see and capture before they waste years trying to, I guess, yeah. So that I have to, as I stated, languish needlessly by doing it wrong because I had psychology all wrong for years. Whereas now the whole purpose of psychology, in my opinion, is to not only create a narrative that enables you to better understand your own story. Your goal as a client is to teach the psychologist what you have been through. They're not like this, take the blue pill or the red pill. You're there to teach them, and in turn by teaching them, you're going to better understand your own. When trauma is usually fragmented mess of memories and thoughts, and you need to create some sort of narrative in order to understand what you have been through and find your truth that you can accept and live with. Anyway, I digress.
But there's one thing There's one thing writing something for yourself and being vulnerable. There's another thing publishing that vulnerability to the world in a completely selfless pursuit to help others.
The fear. Oh, the fear. When I knew that book had not only been picked up, but was on the day of its release, I was terrified. I'm like, because like there is no going back now. Like people will see you. And I'm like, your failures, your mistakes, like even talking about my old boy, like my dad was nervous about what his friends were going to think of him based on like, and I'm like, he's a great dad. I can love him to bits. It's just that obviously being a household full of boys and him always being at work and a lot of men of that era were like that very, I guess, not only stoic and rigid, we call them an emotional icebox. But yeah, he spent most of his time at work and we were raised by mum. So obviously he did the best that he could in order to raise us and give us the best childhood that we could. But at the same time, these are just some of the impacts of a father not being present as much can actually have. And now I guess for any young man, especially, I don't know that for a female, but I'm guessing for most people, we all want to be seen by our father. We all want our dad to tell us that he's proud. But but in the end, I digress somewhere along that lines. But the fear associated with actually allowing people to actually understand and hear and learn about me, especially those soldiers that I served with. I thought that they were going to call me a pussy. I thought I was in for an absolute, like, it was my peers that I'd once worked with that I was most fearful of, because I thought they were going to look down on me as some sort of pathetic loser. And that's the thing. That's the fear of vulnerability. You think people are going to judge us believing it as a weakness. And where I am now, I still believe that little voice in the back of my head, that ego of yours just goes, Nathan, shut the hell up. I'm like, stop being a pussy. You're whinging. You're being a bitch. And I'm like, no. I'm like, the soldier in me, although I did great on the battlefield, also caused me so much pain and so much suffering because I did so much in order to protect that voice of trying to be that hyper masculine stoic individual that it nearly cost me my life. And it wasn't until I realized that, learned that there is so much more to life than trying to pretend that you have to be strong every minute of the day. I was missing out so much color, so much beauty. But it just took a long time to learn it.
Sorry, my cat's come to say hello.
I saw that. I was like, that's a good looking cat. Little leopard of a thing, little tiger.
Oh, he's trying to tell me that he's hungry. So I just, for those that haven't read the book, Nathan served, in one of the most dangerous professions you could ever do. He was hunting for IEDs in Afghanistan, serving alongside the special forces units doing that. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And I was surprised to hear that your mum actually suggested that you went and did it.
Yeah.
When I read that in the book, I was like, hang on a minute.
I don't quite think she knew what she was signing me up for in that regard. I was just like, she's like, oh, no, you like bombs and stuff? I'm like, yeah. There I'll be staying outside of the world, looking for bombs buried in the ground, trying to protect others.
Meanwhile, she's thinking, what, firecrackers? Because you wouldn't have had access to anything as a kid. So she's
most likely, yeah. She's probably like sparkler bombs or something like that. It's like, had a bottle caps. So I'm like, oh, they were good days. They were good days.
Okay, so take a breath because I can tell that you're nervous. We can edit anything else that you don't want in there.
Whatever goes.
Yeah, just don't worry. You're in safe hands.
No. I'll fall in, sir.
Pardon?
I'll fall in. Oh. come over. I'll come over the bridge. And I can tell you when I'm in, I'm in. So it's
Whooshka.
hey, woosa.
Is that what it is? See, hopeless. I'm hopeless.
I don't know, bad boys.
Oh, is that what it's from?
Yeah, that is a woosa. The main boss man when they keep like destroying half the city, trying to chase like one bad guy.
I'm no longer a fan of Will Smith, so we'll let that one go.
Oh no.
After the slap incident.
Yeah, it was a mighty slap.
Yeah, it was. Now, one of the things that I do want to touch on is when you were serving in Afghanistan, you're quite young when you went over and were serving over there, and you're in the bomb detection. Is that the easiest thing? The IED detection.
Yeah, search
unit?
and clearance of IEDs or hidden bombs or roadside bombs, whatever people know them as. Zip.
So one of the things that did come out in the book, which was, I'm going to read this to you. I won't read it as eloquently as you, Nathan, but I shall try my very best. Yes, war is hell, but honestly, it was an honor and a privilege to stand along those special forces officer who I served with, even if it was by circumstance rather than choice at the time. And to those operators, I say, we engineers did all we were tasked with. We met your high standards. We displayed immense courage. We performed our roles with distinction, day in, day out. We are aware that we are nothing more than a support element to your needs, and never did we try to be anything more. But never forget the fear associated with the threat of IEDs on the battlefield, and those moments when you chose to stand back and send us in first.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I was interested in to discover is that you can serve with alongside a special forces unit, but not actually be classified as special forces. And that was interesting because you did try out a couple of times. One, you completed selection, but you didn't pass the interview stage. The other time you were injured and shouldn't have even gone on the course.
Failure.
Kind of need you to work to be able to run 100, 50 Ks with a lot of weight on your back. But it does, particularly at the start of the book, it does come across like you've got an issue with how you were treated within the unit and within the military. How has the book been received by those that you've served with?
All of the guys that I served with at the Special Operations Engineers Regiment, they're so glad it's been said. I guess people were so fearful to actually speak the truth to try in order to potentially upset some of those SF operators. But let me just clarify this. On a one-on-one basis with those operators that we worked with, amazing dudes, funniest guys, loved it. It was more of a cultural thing. The Special Operations Engineers Regiment came along at a unique time because the IED threat in Afghanistan, the hidden bomb threat was like ramping up solidly, and they needed someone to deal with this within a Special Forces framework. Capacity, thank you. So SOA ended up taking that shortfall, and we became, although at the time we weren't technically special forces, we had to live up to their standards, meet their needs, and work alongside them, and perform every other duty that they didn't want to perform, which was a lot of the biometrics, a lot of the prisoner handling, a lot of the, I guess, bomb detection, bomb searching, cache finding, dealing with a lot of the drug labs and blowing up all the drug labs. And we ran around with backpacks full of explosives pretty much every mission. That was pretty much our primary job in order to protect everyone from not only, we were shooters first, always with a team of about 7 guys. So I worked predominantly with the Commandos. I was always with the team of 7 of the guys, and I was the engineer. My job was to always be a shooter first, dealing with the shooting threat. But at the same time, I was also responsible for keeping everyone alive from a threat that no one could see. And over the course of my 2 tours I found 5 of those bombs. I was blown up twice. My vehicle exploded, and standing next to
Just a
another
couple of
vehicle, and that
times.
exploded. Yeah, just a couple of times. All here, all in one piece. Gunfights that works, and so it was received very well by the unit. I haven't really spoken to a lot of the guys outside of the unit, so from let's say SAS or Commandos, I think they all know as well. But it's very different now. From what I've heard now, it's very different. I guess we forged away at a time that has completely... SOA is now a SF-based unit, highly sought after, with a screening and a reinforcement cycle in order to get people up to scratch in order to perform the job. Difficult to get into now, whereas back then it was all about manpower. They're like, we need dudes here, we need them now. And doesn't matter. Just winning dudes who are switched on, fit, and can perform this task at a moment's notice. And so we literally learnt on the job with a lot of overtime. And pretty much when we're doing like CQB, we got like Soldiers 5. They're like, all right, mate, when we go into an urban clearance, you stand here and just follow our lead, and just this is
Get
what
out of
you're
the
going
way.
to do in order so you don't get us killed or yourself killed.
Yeah.
And so we had to, Then when you got a group of commandos stacked on your shoulder, and you're the first one to a door, and you're like, why the this is in Afghan, and you're like, well, bear in mind at the front, well, like your human shields.
I didn't even consider that.
The bombs in the door. The bomb is a real threat. One of my mates stood on an IED in a compound, and it exploded. It's a real threat, and he survived, but badly wounded. But it's
That didn't come across in the book that you were heading in first. I had imagined, obviously I've no military experience.
Not always. Yeah.
Not always obvious that I've got no military experience?
No. So I wasn't always heading it first. It was only when the threat was there. So
I was like, it's pretty obvious, Nathan. Come on, I've got no
obviously. It's like a throwaway word for me. So when I say it, just disregard it. It's like one of those filling words for me.
As I said, I can't even walk downstairs without busting up my ankle. So
Yeah. Oh, goodness.
I had imagined how you were writing it. When they were doing that, it was kind of like, stand over here, we'll go do what we need to do, and therefore basically you're not going to get in the way, you're not going to get accidentally shot or shoot someone else, right? But I hadn't realized that, of course, should be mostly going through the door first because of the IED threat.
Yeah. Whenever the threat was high, obviously they would put us at the front in order to deal with it. But sorry, I'm going to keep saying that, but it's I love the word obviously for some strange,
not obvious to me. It's why we're
reason.
having the conversation, Nathan.
However, when we were frontline soldiers, just tasked with an extraordinary amount of on average, we carried 50 to 60 kilos on our back, including body armor, rifle ammunition, explosives, everything that we carried. About 50, 60 kilos some days. I went out on a 3-day mission because the helicopter couldn't get enough vertical altitude. And so we had a weight capacity limit of 130 kilos per soldier. And so I went out on a 3-day mission with 3 protein bars and 2 liters of water. I couldn't
your body weight?
Yeah.
130. Okay.
100, I was about 105. My body armor, just bare basic body armor, rifle, helmet that had on you, another 30 kilos. And then I carried another 30 kilos in the backpack. And in that backpack was all your necessary stores, and then food and water was the least necessary.
I would have thought water would have been one of the most necessary.
They were like, no, mate, you got to drop weight. And there I am just like throwing out all my water. I had a water purifier, so I found some irrigation ditches, and I'm like pumping water.
Ew.
It was nasty. Man, you got to mix that with a lot of like cordial just to try to drink it. I can tell you, it was and you see it like 100 meters away, like some dude showering in the same puddle. You're like, yeah, life sucks right now.
Why was there that weight limit?
Because the altitude in Afghanistan was extremely high, and a lot of the helicopters, the Black Hawks, in some instances, when they had to drop us on top of some of the mountains, could not get enough altitude. You could hear choppers when they're trying to fly over some of these mountain ranges, because it's like beautiful mountscapes, just like lining both sides, and they're like plains of desert, and then suddenly be this patch of green, and you where pretty much it's been cultivated, and that's where all of the locals live in these patches. And you can hear sometimes a chopper trying to get over some of these mountain ranges. You hear the rotors cavitating.
So it's basically like you've got X amount of, we won't say how many, but X amount of people, so they've got to do a weight calculation. So if they know that everyone's 150 kilos, then they can do the weight calculation for the choppers.
Yeah, so they know how many soldiers are about to come on. They know the altitude that they're about to fly over, because Afghanistan itself is 2,000 meters, roughly, like Tarankot, right, 2,100 meters above sea level already. So then once you obviously start trying to get over some of these mountain ranges, you're hitting some altitudes that is in too high for choppers. So, yeah.
Given the fact that the majority of the time you are out serving alongside the Commandos, 2nd Commando Unit, why did you elect to attempt selection for the SAS? Why not the Commandos?
Well, question. After my first tour, I guess.
Careful, this is going public, Nathan.
I know. I was like, how
Can't diss my boys. Come on now.
God, what is happening? I am so sorry. My headphones just keep cutting off.
Do you have corded headphones?
This is ridiculous.
All right, we're back. We had some technical issues.
Oh, wow. What a fail.
I think it was staged. I was just asking you why you wanted to join the SAS and not the Commandos when you worked with them, and suddenly, technical issues, Nathan.
Oh, it was a perfect time for a question.
I know, I wasn't going to let you get away with it. You were just about to diss my boys. Come on, I've had quite a few of them on the podcast.
Oh, my goodness.
Don't do it. Don't diss them. Come on.
Don't diss them. I guess at the time, I always saw the SAS as the elite of the elite. Like Commandos, I always saw them as second run. Yeah, at the time. I know.
They're going to come for you now, Nathan. You're going to get a few messages.
I couldn't believe it. Yeah, and I was just like, man. And then, because our first tour was so much, because we did a lot of vehicle operations in that first tour, and that's when we found like over 20 IEDs, and I was like, man, I became very, my team and I became very proficient in our job, but I was like, this is what it's all about. I'm like, I don't want to, this is not where I want to be. But for me personally, I wanted to be at that top tier upper echelon. I want to be able to stand behind the whole notion of being able to say that I work with special forces. I don't know. There was some, when you're in the military.
Wait, hang on a minute.
Just
wait a minute. You said I wanted to say that I worked with the special forces. Are you saying that the Commandos are not special forces, Nathan?
Oh, no.
I'm giving you an opportunity to correct that.
I wanted to be in special forces. So rather, because SOA at the time, my engineering regiment wasn't technically.
Yeah.
We were under special operations, but we weren't special forces. I wanted to be, for me personally, to actually be able to say that I was special forces. It's like one of those things that like you got to put to bed. Not everyone has it. Not everyone really has that drive to push themselves that far in order to do it. But I guess for myself, I did. But yeah, so I decided to go SAS because I did it with one of my mates, and we both liked. We just thought they were better at the time. However, after my second tour,
gave him a dirty look, everybody. I gave him a dirty look.
After my second tour, I knew I should never went for SAS again. I knew my personality and who I was, and after what I'd done with them, I'm like, I'm a commando through and through. If I was to be, I don't fit the mold of what it meant to be in the SAS sort of world. And I loved what commandos did. Obviously, because we were our mission orders, parameters were raid and disrupt, and instead of doing like high value target and like time sensitive sort of like tracking down single bad guys, commandos were like, well, we get intel saying we know there's a lot of bad dudes in that village. Go in there, stir the hornet's nest, and see what happens. And so, literally, every job was us walking into ambushes. And it was exciting. It's hard to describe. I'm like the ecstasy of actually being in a gunfight is like nothing you want to feel more present and more grounded. I can tell you there is nothing else in the world where you are literally there with it in that moment. And I can still feel the bullets whizzing past my face, and I'm running down this hill, kicking at my feet. You can hear them ricocheting all around you, and you're just like, oh my God, this dude is a really shit shot, or I'm just a lucky son of a bitch.
I've heard it described as the flow state before. And I think
100%.
Is that a scenario when they were like 100 meters away from you?
Yeah, that's it.
And you're trying to run down the hill?
Yeah, 100%. It was, and that's where, and that's one of many situations that actually occurred overseas. And I guess it's, and and people wonder why it's hard for soldiers to try to transition back into normal life, and why they take up real, I guess, adrenaline seeking, or they're known as adrenaline junkies, and that thrill seeking behavior. Because I'm like, civilian life, when you get out, I'm like, nothing compares to that world in which you once lived. I'm like, you've lived on the upper echelon, where it's like survival. Like, it is like primitive. Like, you are going back like thousands of years, where it is like us or them. And then suddenly come back here, rules, order. We had a lot of rules to not give it. No, we had rules of engagement. We knew we were not allowed to fire unless fired upon first.
It was very strict.
Very strict. Obviously, I'm not going to get involved with the Burton report.
We'll leave that one to the side.
We'll leave that one to the side. I do not condone behaviours that go outside the rules of engagement. But trial by media, and the way it all went forth, and pretty much been the blanket sweep of SF forces being guilty until proven innocent, which is a complete contradiction to how the judicial system works. This whole situation has been an absolute joke.
Yeah. We had said that we weren't going to touch on that, but I'll just say this. I do think it's very disappointing that men and women volunteer to protect, and they get ordered and sent to do something by the Australian government, and then they're not supported by the Australian government. And the military leadership, I think that is very disappointing, and I will leave that there.
Yeah. 100%. No, I'm all with how the leader of culture himself can pretty much deny himself of leading culture. I'm like, in the end, it all comes downhill, mate. That's the way hierarchical military structure works. Shit flows downhill.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
Anyways, so you considered the Commando second rate and wanted to join the SAS?
Yes, that's where we were at the time. You are really pushing me into this round, aren't you? I'm just staring. But
I am interested to know how you felt, considering you were serving alongside them. You passed the Commandos. You completed the SAS training, but you didn't pass the interview stage, which would have been absolutely describe how devastating that was. Yeah. But then to go back and be considered suitable and okay to go back and serve alongside the Special Forces, but yet not actually be classified as Special Forces. And now you've just told me that the unit that you used to serve with is now actually classified as Special Forces. Yeah. But now you can't actually refer to yourself as of a special forces. Like, how does that all sit? Because to me, that I would have, I'd be a bit jaded about that.
Good choice of word, jaded. That's a strong military term there,
Oh, is
jaded.
it?
Yeah. I guess, hence one of the reasons why I wrote this book was because a lot of the exploits, I think as I worded it in there, that we did lay buried and forgotten. I've read quite a few books within the SF community, and most of them, if anything, will mention in passing our existence. But yet there we were with them every day, risking life and limb. And sometimes some of the guys that wouldn't even get out of their vehicles until we cleared it first. Especially on our first tour, like, that was rough, like just IED after IED. And then suddenly by the end, the dudes they would not tell us to speed up. They would not get in our way. They'd be like, you guys just do you, get us there and keep us alive, because these IEDs were so prevalent. They were terrifying. And we'd cleared an area, a massive area, when so it's called a vehicle drop-off point. It's a big protective circle, vehicles pointing every direction, and it's like 100 square meters. So we had 7 dudes. We got like 15 minutes to try to clear 100 square meters. We're in the middle of nowhere, like nowhere from anywhere, and we set up shop, all sweep, got out of the vehicle. Everyone's walking around doing their own thing now, and then literally a vehicle, as I mentioned in the book, drove over an ID just about 10 meters from me when we were, and how these things were literally laying anywhere and everywhere, just waiting in silence to kill us.
I did feel sorry for that guy because he'd already been in 2 IED exposures.
Jimmy
you
Bang,
called him
yeah.
Jimmy Bang Bang. Did you get Jimmy 3 bangs after that? Like,
No, Jimmy Bang Bang, he only got 2
poor
bangs
bugger.
after his no, poor bugger. I was, I couldn't believe it. After that second one, and obviously because of my food being on our vehicle had been buckled, and I couldn't get the food out, so that's why he was over there to help me try to get the food bins out. I was like, trying to like raid a candy store. I was like, oh my god, I'm starving. I couldn't get into this, and I was like, pull it open with one of the big bushmasters, and obviously as he drove back, it hit an IED that we missed in our search, because sometimes we were dealing with bombs that don't have much metal in them, and so it's very difficult for us to find, and that's what was always missed, the fact that we risked life and limb almost daily. We not only dealt with the gunfights, but we also risked life and limb daily from the threat that no one could see.
Are you comfortable talking through the situation you found yourself in the ditch?
That story is so much, eh? Probably fidget a bit with this one, but yeah. So obviously our job was the search and clearance of improvised explosive devices. We were called out for a mission. This is on my second tour. We were moving into the Helmand province to help the Brits. They were getting absolutely pummeled. And so we went over there to try to help out. We knew that their methodology was a lot more advanced. So in our orders group, I was pretty much volunteered as tribute for this job, where in the briefing they said, Nathan, we know there's IEDs in this trench system on top of this hill that we need you to clear. So obviously keep your wits about you. But then after that briefing, I was also told that, Nathan, from an intelligence briefing, I got pulled aside from the INT guys, and they said, Nathan, we know that the enemy over there know our SOPs, our standard operating procedures. So you're about to use a metal detector to find bombs that have no metal in them. Godspeed. So there I was, in the middle of the night, at -10, using a metal detector to clear a trench on top of this hill that I knew was probably not going to work.
And you were doing this under nods as well, so
under
limited
night vision.
Yeah.
Yes, everything under night vision goggles. I turned right around this corner, and I literally had to clear like every like millimeter. I'm like searching and clearing, and as I was going through, I'm like kept getting so many metal hit, and it's because I kept finding 5.56 brass casings, which is the standard NATO round, which I then remembered was I was told beforehand it was the same trench that one of our mates from SOA, Rowan Robertson, was killed in, shot and killed. So obviously there I am, like trying to do my job, knowing that this is the same trench that your mate was killed, but then knowing that that very gun battle is impeding your ability to stay alive as well. This is a stressful night. Went around a corner to clear this trench, this pit, and I literally had to bash through the top nearly inch of ice to see the dirt had snapped frozen. It was that cold. My water bottle was frozen in my pocket. And as I bashed through the top inch of dirt, I remember seeing this big chunk of dirt broke free, like big chunk of ice, and in the backwards stroke of pulling that big chunk of dirt out of the way with my IED hunting tool, which is pretty much a Bunnings rake, pitchfork thing. Best IED hunting tool ever. Who needs army issued intrinsically safe when you go to the local $12 Bunnings special? As I pulled back, suddenly this package the size of a tissue box came flying out of the wall from about a meter in front of me and landed directly in front of my face. Not like the movies. And I guess no training can prepare you for a moment of complete emotional overwhelm. Instantly, I knew what it was, and it was the battery pack of an IED. I completely shut down. No thoughts, no feelings. It was just complete cognitive shutdown. What felt like eternity was probably like 30 seconds or so. I finally came back into the moment, and then I studied that red tape that was wrapped all these D-cell batteries up, and I saw the electrical wire do this perfect little loop and then run directly into the dirt and underneath me. And it was in that moment I realized that I was laying on the pressure plate or the switch of this bomb, and I had missed it. Yeah. Take two, just full shutdown. No training prepares you for moments like this. They can train you how to be calm and use your rifle under extreme pressure, where you just drill it into habit, and you get this like neural superhighway in order to be able to perform your job and your duties. But the emotional side of the house, that's when we weren't trained at all, and how to deal with situations that literally shut you down. What felt like 30 seconds, what felt like an eternity was another 30 seconds. I finally came back to. I felt like I had completely disassociated from my body, pretty much ready for impending doom and death. Pretty much your mind just pulls out of your body going, well, this is it, mate. I'm not going to let you be here for this. From there, obviously I came back to, training kicked in. I was just like, well, the most likely situation to switch is central to this trench. I'm going to brace myself as wide as I possibly can with my elbows and my legs, try not to touch anything I haven't touched before. I'm still alive right now. I haven't set the switch off. I don't know where it is exactly. And I managed to get up and as wide as I could this trench. I was a little bit wider than me, brace myself. There I was doing this epic plank in the middle of the night with night vision goggles over the top of a bomb, when I managed to throw myself up onto my knees. And then I was like, okay, stage one complete. I was like, let's take a breather, take in my surroundings. And that's when I turned around, when unbeknownst to me, 5 of my mates, Commando guys that I was working with, had climbed into the trench and were sitting in the pit about 1 meter directly behind me, completely oblivious to what had just transpired. And I could still feel the tightness of my jaw as I turned around. I'm like, guys, I'm laying on an IED. Move away now. I could still see his jaw just drop open. That, as a memory to recollect on, is pretty much the most pivotal moment of that entire thing, of knowing the severity of what I was going through. And obviously, they didn't have to be told twice. That they jumped ship. They up and at him pretty quickly and got out of there. And there I was, left on my own to fend for myself. I was the sacrificial lamb here. And from there, I managed to get to my feet. And then in one foul swoop, once I'd cleared out, and then I managed to jump and roll out of the trench. And I can still remember, there I am standing on top of this hill. I can see like first light slowly piercing over the horizon. I've been searching for like 3 hours when this had all happened. It has been a long night. I was tired. I stood up and I'm like, ooh. That was close. In one of the most traumatic moments of my life, that was all I had.
That was close.
That was close. I was like, no, I'm like, stuff this. I'm not dealing with this shit tonight. I'll deal with this in the morning. I'll get a tech up here. He can come up and deal with it. I'm done. I'm packing up shop. I'd found 2 that night. That was actually the second one I'd actually found. The first one was just as bad, but that's a story for another day. At dawn, a tech came up, explosive ordnance disposal. So he's like my boss guy, and he's the one who deal. My job was to find him. His job is to blow him up. Both jobs suck. Obviously, his job was to deal and play and lay over the bomb in order to explode it and get it out of the way, whereas my job was to find something that I didn't know was there yet. And then whenever a tech wasn't around, then my job was to also blow it up as well. So turns out the main switch was directly underneath my chest. It was a carbon rod pressure plate, so there was no metal signature in it. Hence how I missed it. And the thing is, though, it's funny how life works though sometimes, because the greatest sin that I committed, which was pulling the IED and removing it from its seating area, actually saved my life. And it's funny how sometimes the darkest moments is actually the greatest blessing that we'll ever have. We may not see it in the moment, but later on you finally see it, because in the end, by ripping that battery pack out, committing that greatest sin actually saved my life, because if I had taken one more bite forward, the pressure plate was underneath my chest, but I was propped up on my elbows. One more bite forward, the switch would have been underneath my waist and I would have set it off. So it actually saved my life. However, although the reality is, if I had set it off, I may still be here. And that's because the main explosive was underneath all my mates. Yeah. It was designed for the first person to set it off and take out everyone behind him. And although we all got out alive that night, for many years I believed that I'd failed. Like, my job was to protect them from that threat, and there I was. I nearly got them all killed. And although we got out alive, I believed I failed. And I punished myself for many years post that situation, to the point where I never spoke about it. I mentioned it a couple of times when I got back from that mission, and I buried it to never speak about that incident again. It just hurt too much, the shame, the guilt, the failure. Who wants to bring up those stories and those memories of the things that we've done that are where we've, accounts of the word fucked up. They're the hardest moments for us to ever, I guess, accept and live with. But yeah, that night really messed me up. And yeah.
You mention the beast in the book, the inner beast wanting to come out. You also talk about the stoic upbringing that you had, and the example of men in your life not discussing emotions and feelings that came out in terms of your relationships as well with women. So dirty on that, on the first girlfriend that cheated on you, though. She set you up for a few disastrous situations into the relationship.
I'm a soft, sensitive soul.
But you know what? One of the things that I have found with my male mates, and also I don't think is actually talked about, that men are actually just as sensitive, if not in some cases more sensitive than women.
A lot of stats on that.
But then they don't actually have that outlet, right? We'll get together and have a chat with our girlfriends and debrief and talk about everything, right?
Yeah.
You guys don't. Like, I'll come back and my husband will be like, oh, such and such broke up with their girlfriend. Well, when did this happen? I don't know. Why did they break up? I don't know. How is he? I don't know. You know, like...
Yeah. Well, most guys will tell you that they're sinking a carton of piss every night rather than tell you that they're suffering from a broken heart.
Yeah.
And that's where it takes... Guys have a tendency to speak through their actions, to speak through their behaviors. And it's up to others to be able to read through those behaviors and see abnormalities and go, okay, something's wrong here. Whereas females have a far greater tendency to express that inner world, which is also comes from that, obviously, a lot of that upbringing, which is a lot of boys were taught that boys don't cry, have a can of concrete and harden up, be a man. And they were pretty much the same notions and ideology that I was brought up, raised to believe, and which created a very stoic individual. And I guess, and this is where it's hard, because there I was experiencing trauma and I had zero emotional literacy and capacity in order to be able to speak about what I'd gone through. I remember when early days with seeing a psychologist, I remember they didn't know what to say after I told them after I was blown up. My vehicle hit an IED and exploded. And unsure of how to go, she's like, oh, so tell me, how did it feel?
It hurt?
It was shit. That was my answer. I'm like, that's all I had. I'm like, I did not have the vocabulary. And this is what people don't understand, is that when it comes to like therapy and psychological support, for a lot of the clinicians, the goal is not to pretty much give them a whole new vocabulary within the first session. I'm like, it's like peeling back an onion. You got to get them talk about their behaviors, and ever so slowly add these key words, add this emotional literacy until emotional literacy is the finish, the end line, where they can finally find it within themselves and be able to speak about their own pain, suffering, despair, with clarity and a narrative that makes sense. But I can tell you right now, pain, suffering, despair, I'm like, those words never existed. I was like, when you talk about psychology, like this is back in 2014 when I was discharged. I thought anyone who saw a psychologist was like one foot of the cuckoo's nest kind of thing. I'm like, psychology was not a thing. In overseas, we had our post-op psych screens, and I'm like, we knew what
to
to
say.
say
Yeah,
in
I've
order
heard that a
to
lot.
get through the screen and get back to war. We
And I think there's something to be said. I mean, you need tough people to do that job. I mean, that job's not for everybody. There needs to be a level of grit and determination and toughness. I mean, I don't want to go and do it. Like, I'm quite happy that there's other people volunteering to do that, and I'm very thankful for that. But there's also there needs to be that ability to take the release valve and just sort of decompress it a little bit. It was interesting. You talked about, and you actually put the letter that your dad wrote to you, talking about the relationship between not sharing feelings and emotions. It took him a few. It actually seemed to be a letter that he wrote to you when you first departed, but it seemed that you didn't get it until a couple of years into your service. Saying how much he loved and admired you and respected you. I'm surprised you put in the fact that you were the favourite of the boys in the book. How did that go down?
the only one who does anything around the house. The rest of the boys were shit. So, they all know. They already knew it. So I was like,
Three brothers. You got three brothers, don't you?
3 brothers.
Yeah,
It's 5 years altogether between all 4 of us.
Yeah.
So it's very, very close in age. But they all knew. But then that's where it's it was the first time it took for me to stand on the battlefield at war for my dad to tell me he was proud. And it was something that I didn't really know at the time, but in hindsight, I do now. It was something that I was chasing for years.
Did you ever feel that he was proud of you and that he just didn't say it? Or is it you didn't feel it at all?
I'd get those glimpses of, and it was like literally just before, like, there were moments here and there, but it was this moment just before I deployed from my first tour. And he took me for a lunch with one of his friends, and I could see him that he spoke to them, and introduced me to them because he's a long-time customer buying his lunches from this little sandwich shop. And he's like, "Oh, this is my soldier son. He's about to deploy to Afghanistan, blah, blah, blah." And it was in that moment, I was like, that was the first time I truly, he would say it to other people, but he would never say it to us as kids. And I don't know why people have a tendency not to say it. It shouldn't be something that's said like every day, like, "Oh, I'm proud of you for being an absolute rat bag." But it's just like, when they do good, never underestimate the desire of a child or son or daughter of wanting to know that that you're proud of who they are and they're worthy of the sacrifice you've made raising them. Because that is all I wanted. And I remember, obviously, when I got that letter, it's literally one of the most cherished possessions that I got. And obviously, there I am talking about some of the most pivotal moments in my life in that book, and that is one of them. Because it meant such a great deal to me, as I can only imagine that's happening in so many others. But I guess we don't say it because we don't want to say it too many times or make it lose its meaning, or I guess like dilute it in any ways or such. So and then before you know it, you don't say it at all, and then sooner or later years go by and you've never said it.
Do you think that was the start of the chipping down the wall of going, oh, it's actually okay to share emotions because your dad had shared his?
Oh, I see where you're going with that one. I've never looked at that. That's a good question. No, that's not where it happened. That for me was more of a chapter of knowing that I was a worthy son closed. Not to do with, I guess,
it's okay to open up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now that all came after my tours, and then pretty much when I hit my rock bottom.
talk a lot about, before you got to the rock bottom, you having this disassociated moments. I don't know, is that how you would refer to them when you're out in public trying to assimilate back into society? It's something that I've asked a few of the guests that have served about it, that I had always assumed that there'd be a level of frustration and anger with, you've got no idea what I've just done to allow your freedom, and you're acting like an idiot, sort of a thing, being drunk down the pub or whatever.
Yeah.
And most of them have always said, no, that's not the case. You know, they can do whatever. And you're the first person that's been really raw about the fact that that was actually a thing with you, and the anger of what you and your mates were asked to do, and then therefore, and the waste, like other people are sort of almost wasting it. Why were you so raw about it in the book? Was it because you know that everyone else that's I want to not paint a broad brush, most people that serve sort of always feel the same?
Yep. Because no one, I realized that, I went through some filth and some crap when I got out and all that sort of stuff. But then I'm like, no one was speaking. No one was telling the truth, which is why, I guess, for me, I ended up falling into the very shoes that I longed for when I needed it most. And hence became like a mental health advocate, public speaker, in order for nothing other reason than to share with others what it means to be vulnerable. Show what it's like for someone to actually be open, raw, and authentic, and go, I've been through all this stuff, and yet here I am telling you that my favorite movie is Notting Hill, and I'm an absolute closet softie. I'm a big soft teddy bear, and I'll own it. I'm my own unique being. I have my own likes and dislikes, and I guess that's actually a really good question, because no one was saying it, and I know that I'm not the only one who feels it. And it's not like it's not. Hence why a lot of soldiers they'll blame it, going, oh, literally is like what, like in America, for example, they're like veterans jump on a plane, everyone's solution, or I'm like, what?
Yeah,
like, I don't think I could deal with that to that extent. However, I'm like,
there's a different level of appreciation.
We got like one day, Anzac Day. And so what? And then guys like they put on their medals and for that one day feel a sense of pride. But what the other 364 days? I'm like, and then suddenly you're like, what? Here I am going the other side of the world doing all this sort of stuff, and you come home, people are like acting like complete and utter dickheads. And you're like, what am I fighting for? Because in the end, I'm like, it's not politics. Once you get over there, you realize you're not fighting on the war on terror. Like you're literally fighting for your mates. You fight to keep your mates alive, and you will do everything in your power because it's ingrained into you to stop thinking for yourself and think only for everyone else. Because when you think for everyone else and not just for yourself, literally you have everyone else's back, and that means everyone else has your back. So you actually create this interconnected web that is far stronger and has far greater chances of survival than any individual working alone.
Do you think that's why it's so disappointing to veterans that if the culture is you do it for your mates and you've got everyone's back, and then you see that not being the case with the higher echelon or the politicians?
Yeah.
Do you think that's... I would be really angry in regards to that.
It was... for knowing the politician sides of the military had protected themselves in order when all this Burton report come out, and then literally tried to bury SF with this whole warrior culture.
We don't have to
And
talk about the
yeah,
Burton report. It's just a, it's
100%.
just a general,
But it was very disappointing because I'm like, we were forged into these individuals to serve a purpose.
that you guys made us.
We don't send ourselves to war. We
Yeah.
go to war on the backs of politicians.
Yeah.
We are willing participants in order to engage in some of the most, I guess, the greatest atrocities of mankind, which is where you strip humanity and you perform what you do is inherently immoral. That is our job.
I don't know if I would classify it as immoral, though.
What is socially accepted is for every soldier to do what is morally wrong. And every soldier must be able to hopefully find within themselves to accept the fact, because every man must pay the consequences of what he has done.
So do you think that's where a lot of the anger comes from? We'll talk about you because I don't want to...
Right. Broad strokes, yeah.
Yeah. That if you're talking it is in terms of a moral injury, and that's like you've sacrificed a part of your soul to do something that somebody else has asked of you, and you volunteer to do that, and then you're feeling that that's not even appreciated. Do you think that's where a lot of the beast that you talk about, the inner beast, was sort of that anger?
I experienced quite a lot of trauma. So in its nutshell, I was, so blown up twice. Found myself laying on an IED with the main charging of mates. Found 5 IEDs. Gunfights. I was pinned down by enemy gunfire. I've had RPGs fly meters over my head. I was missed by an enemy sniper. They missed me by half a meter. It contemplated my own death on numerous occasions. And I guess the list, and seen enough death to last me a lifetime. I've also carried mates off the battlefield. I've lost mates. And there's a lot of trauma there. And I was 22 and 24. I was a spring chicken. And I guess, you're asked at a very young age to defy all that you are. All that is Western culture. Western culture, thou shalt not kill. It's literally, we have rules and laws that protect people from other people, per se. And so you literally are asked to defy all that you are. And I guess, and that for me is where a lot of moral injury for a lot of guys stems, or even watching on as you know that other people do it. Because I know that every time someone was killed, that is someone's father. That is someone's husband, someone's son. I'm like, you don't, in the moment you try to keep it separated where you're like, no, he is the enemy. The enemy is stripped of humanity, because in the end you need to keep moving forward. You can't sit there and dwell, but you also know, and in the moment you're able to sort of push that stuff aside, but eventually it catches up with you. And and that's where obviously taking life was one of the biggest components that really obviously impact, I guess, moral injury, because I know that years and years and years down the track, after years of therapy, the one greatest moment and epiphany that I had was when my psychologist, I had a full PTSD meltdown on a date with somebody. And I couldn't work out what was going on. I told her a few things. I don't know. She kept asking. And then before we know it, we ran down a rabbit hole that I couldn't get out of. And then she was like, oh, regardless of what you've done, I still think you're a good person. And I just and I threw filth and more filth. And before I knew it, I opened Pandora's box of trauma that I had. I didn't even know it was even there. Trying to prove to her that I wasn't.
Wasn't a good person.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that no one could possibly love me because of the things that I have done and things that I've seen. I am ashamed of all that I am. And it was with the psychologist. Turns out I was lucky to have an appointment booked 2 days later. And I went, and that's where I'd learned. I'm like, this moment obviously caused me to have a full PTSD, emotional cognitive shutdown. I was like, well, I need to go back in here, because I'm like, if it's causing me any form of adverse reaction talking about it, it means it is not dealt with, it is not resolved, and I have to go back in there, but with obviously professional help. And we went back in there, and after I told her everything, she started talking, and I literally had no idea what she said for the first 2-3 minutes. Obviously, I then apologized, saying I literally had vanished from the room again, full shutdown in the room with her. And she's like, okay, we've got a problem here. And on the 59th minute, after an entire session of discussing, trying to work out what was actually going on here, she goes, Nathan, when we talk about trauma, we're usually talking about or PTSD, usually talking about inescapability or hopelessness. But she's like, it's not, in this situation, it's not that. What's causing you the most grief was the sheer fact that you asked yourself to cause harm to others.
Mm. You asked yourself, or you were asked?
She asked me. Well, she asked me, she's like, Nathan, what's causing much grief is the sheer fact that you asked yourself, or as a soldier, I was asking myself to cause harm to others. And that's where she said, any person who thinks like that, that is remorse.
Mm.
And that is the telltale sign of a good person.
100%. It's one of the things that I think a lot of people miss in terms of people that are in the military, and the majority of the people that I've spoken to on the podcast are ex-special forces, that the level of compassion and heart and you refer to yourself as a teddy bear, there's it's interesting. I see it more in people that have served that level of compassion and sweetness than a lot in sort of a lot of other people. And I think it is missed. And it's one of the reasons why I like having veterans on the podcast, because I think that element of that side of people needs to be shown. And there's a level of, I've got to be rough and tumble because that's the profession and all that sort of stuff. And it is.
Yeah.
But then there's the other side of the teddy bear inside that I think a lot of people don't get to see. And
you don't have anything to prove.
Yeah.
And it's not to anyone else, but it's to yourself.
Mm.
I don't have to prove myself that I'm the kind of guy that has the courage to run into a burning building and not be the guy that runs out. I know within myself that I will stand there alongside my mates in some of the most harshest moments, and I will not collapse and become a liability. I know that I have the heart in order to finish SAS selection and lose 15 kilos, be one of 28 that actually, out of 120 that actually finished the course. And then obviously I know I can finish it. Then obviously in the acceptance where they go, you've either made it or you haven't, they just said, no, we like you, but not this time, come back next time. Yes. Well, that was a kick in the teeth. But I know for myself, I've proven to myself that I am enough. Took years though, because I was ashamed of what I'd seen and I hadn't dealt with my trauma. I hated myself. And that impacted a lot of my relationships, a lot of my friendships. I deal with obviously PTSD, depression, anxiety. That black dog is brutal. And although I've dealt with a lot of my depression, PTSD, anxiety is a lingering pain. I was at a conference the other day and I'm like constantly walking out of the venue, just like, I'm like just so overwhelmed by the number of people and all the talking and the noise. I'm just like, oh, there's just so much going on. But it's completely lost track of what the question was.
I have to. Don't worry about it.
Oh my God, where are we going?
I don't know. It was down a rabbit hole. We said we were going to go
Wow,
down some rabbit hole.
I've vanished.
What are some coping mechanisms that you do if you're in an overwhelmed situation and you're in a conference, for example? It's just as simple as sitting there towards the back of the room near the exit so you can just walk out of the room when you need to? Take a moment?
Yeah. So for me, like in that, I constantly walk out of the venue, whereas I used to be ashamed of the whole notion of anxiety, and so I'd just keep myself in there, and I'd just like fight the pain. It's hard to describe what anxiety feels like. It's like your brain's on fire, and you're like, and you just got to,
your body's itchy.
You got to get out of the environment, even if for a brief moment, and take a few deep breaths. And that's where the two greatest things I learned was mindfulness and gratitude. And that's what I'd do. I'd go outside, take some few deep breaths, and pretty much recenter. Like, as cliche as it is, like three things that you can see, three things that you can hear, three things that you can smell, and try to recenter my mind and like just bring it back down from the overwhelm that brought me out in the first place. So that is one of the big coping strategies. I might even jump on my phone and doom scroll for like 10 minutes on like Instagram Reels, because I'm like, it will completely shut down that anxiety, whatever was causing you. And I would just doom scroll some videos, which would completely shut down what I was thinking about and just give my mind a chance to rest and recover briefly. And if you do that, if you don't push yourself too far and you do that in regular intervals, you can actually get through some of these big events for like 5 hours at a time. Whereas I used to last 45 minutes to 2 hours, and I'll be like absolutely like, blood pressure's like through the roof, and I'm just like, bloodshot eyes.
One of the things that I was very pleased that you wrote about is obviously after you discharged, you were medically discharged from the military because you didn't have working hips in the end. I think that's the best way of putting it.
Yeah, I have a broken unit. Yeah. Yeah. Drop the beating.
One of the things that I was really pleased that you put in there is just how many times you went to therapy, and if that therapist didn't work for you, you sought somebody else out. I've had a lot of ex-serving members say to me they find it more comfortable to speak to women because they're not having to have the ego and the bravado of the alpha male sort of against another male.
Yes.
So it didn't surprise me that the therapist that you ended up was a female that helped you in the end. But I was pleased that was a narrative in the book, that it's kind of, without saying it was like I kept going back. I knew I needed help and I kept seeking it.
Yeah, and that's where I guess when I hit rock bottom, it was it was the precipice of change. And it's unfortunate that a lot of mankind must hit rock bottom in order to change, and it's always the catalyst that enables us to see differently and do things differently. And that was when I let go of that soldiering, hyper masculine ego that was trying to protect the soldier in me that wanted to feel strong and feel powerful. And I realized that everything that he served great on the battlefield, but he's not doing anything for me now. I'm like, I need a new era of me. I need to evolve, because who he is and who I am the version of me that I am trying to protect does not have all the answers, and in turn actually wants me dead.
You tried to let a few friends in. One time you wrote about the fact that you let a mate in and he didn't really know how to handle it and kind of went, "You'll be right, mate," sort of a thing. And the shame that you felt, finally opening up and then having that almost a rejection.
The weight that lifted in that moment by just, when you feel like that atlas.
No, that was before. That was
but this is when I was speaking to my mate when I was still in the military, and I reached out and I spoke to him, and I'm like, and I remember in that moment when I finally said it to him, I'm like, this weight lifted off my shoulders, But then moments later, when I looked across and gave him a chance to speak, because I'm like, this is the first time I ever divulged anything from the inside of me of that something is not right. And then he turned, looked at me, and he was like, what the hell was that? And I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? And he's like, this is awkward. I'm like, oh my God, that is awkward. I was like, Nathan, shut the hell up. And he's like, and just things went quiet. And then about 2 minutes later, he just like, oh, man, sometimes you just got to tough it out, yeah.
Such a blokey.
Yeah.
Ugh.
That was my moment. That was my moment when I risked it all to be vulnerable. And in that moment, it shut down and blew up in my face, and I never spoke about my problems until it almost cost me my life. And that was a rude and harsh lesson on myself to go, pick your bloke or pick the person you speak to, because they may be your best mate, but they may not be the right person to engage in that conversation with. And I knew the right guy I should have spoken to. And when I did hit rock bottom, I was with a group of my army mates. This was years after my service. I was at a mate's wedding. And it was the one guy that actually was the right guy, who had been concerned of my well-being for years. And he constantly called me through those early years when I was like just spiraling out of control. And hit rock bottom, and then he was there to catch me, and he literally saved my life.
Well, he caught you punching a wall at the wedding.
No, not punching the wall. That was me trying to release the beast was trying to drag me under. It was like drowning me, and that's what I call the darkness, the black dog. I'm like, for me, it was the beast, and it was literally trying to drag you under the ground. And I was trying to release this pressure valve, this pain inside, and I literally was punching this wall, trying to open up these valves. But no matter how hard I would usually use adrenaline-seeking behavior in order to, I guess, open that valve. I was at a wedding, at a reception, punching a wall in order to try to like punch some of that pain out through my fist, but it was jammed. And then that's when I found myself contemplating the end, and created a plan, and I was ready to, and I found peace.
What went through your mind at that point when you go, I'm gonna punch a rock wall? Is it just to feel something?
Yeah, I was. To describe depression or PTSD, or like those internal, like, imagine you broke your arm. And I'm like, but I was like, have you ever broken your arm and the pain, or have you ever broken anything or hurt any part of your body where it was that excruciating, that painful, that you literally contemplated ending your own life and was willing to put it into action and do it? Have you ever hurt that much? And I'm like, this is what psychological despair or suffering feels like. It is so overwhelming, so overbearing, and it is not like a mild case of the blues where you're just, I don't know, sad for a day or two. Yeah, this is like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 12 months of the year, and for a lot of us, year after year after year of just darkness and pain, to the point where no one wants to die, but you just get to, you hurt for so long. You're living in this darkness for so long that you no longer see any chance of light. And you go, well, sometimes, yeah, you lose hope, and you believe that, I guess, to end it all is the most merciful thing. And that's where, yeah. And it's hard because suicide is always taught as something that is selfish, but then that's where I contradict it, and I'm like, I'm not vouching or condoning.
Yeah, we're not
suicide.
advocating it. Yeah.
No, but I understand it. And that is because right now everyone says, oh, but think, if you take your own life, think of your family, think of your friends. But I'm like, what about me? If I live, you're asking me to do all the suffering. Yes, you may, whereas if I die, at least my suffering can go, but obviously I then in turn create suffering for you and grief. But I'm like, it's a double-edged sword. Either way, someone has to hurt. And if you're asking me to stay, you're asking me to suffer instead of you. I obviously do everything in our power now in order to stop people from ever doing that, and obviously making change to not ever reach that end point and go, if you do it right. And like you were saying before, I went and saw 5 different sites. I realized that not all, just like no 2 accountants are the same, same as no 2 psychologists. You got to find one that fits you. And the one that fit me was one that challenged me. I needed her not to listen to me vent, but to question what I was saying and make me really think through, I guess, the narrative that I was putting forth. And eventually, through time, it was like rebuilding a car with her. I stripped my car back down to a bare shell. And with my psychologist, I checked over each piece and slowly pieced it back together. Thing is, though, she could not touch the car. And that's where people get it wrong. She cannot help me put the car back together. But she can stand next to you and say, put that tire or put that bolt through there. And together we'll check over it and check if it's broken, see if it's salvageable and repairable. So which is like checking different beliefs, different habits, different behaviors and go, what's working, what is not working. And literally for me, becoming a student of the game where I no longer try to protect a version of me that has obviously got me here in the first place and go, I need to evolve and learn to become a whole new person.
Given the fact that this mate at the that you talked to eventually at the wedding had been reaching out to you for years, was it that's the fact that you were ready, or did he approach you differently in that moment that made you open up to him?
He was approaching me for years in a time when I was not ready to hear it. He's like, Bolts, what's wrong, mate? 2 people knew that something wasn't right with me in my last years in service. And it was him and a female that was good friends with. And they both knew that something wasn't right. And he would constantly come up to me, and after a while, I coined them as well-being checks. I'm like, he's like, hey, Bolts, I need to talk to you. And and I'm like, oh man, eventually it was just like, mate, F off. I'm like, I don't want your well-being checks. I don't want to hear it. But he kept coming back. And then obviously when I got out, he also kept calling me every 3 months and I would never answer. And I'd never, because literally he was a reminder of all that I had lost, a world that I was once connected to people. And he was like a memory of someone who's still functional. And here I am, this broken, wounded linger. That's how I saw myself. I was like, the shame I had in being injured and then being diagnosed with PTSD, depression, anxiety. I was like, I was so ashamed of myself. So I couldn't answer the phone. I couldn't face it. But then the thing is, years later, I then went up to him and I said to him, do you know how you called me every 3 months? And he's like, yeah. I was like, I just want to thank you. He goes, although I'd never answered those calls, I always knew you were there. And that someone actually cared about me when I hated myself. Oh, that one got me.
Did you ever ask him what made him continually reach out when you were blanking him?
It's just a good person. It is your mate. That's what mates do. If your mates don't, then you got to seriously question whether they're your mate. I'm like, if you have no one that you can reach out to, no one that you can speak to and share, and then you don't have the courage to share some of the darkest moments of your life, then I'm like, you're only hurting yourself. Because in the end, if you are suffering and you're not willing, talk therapy, which is what you do with a psychologist rather than like a psychiatrist, where they want to, obviously in a general framework, want to just fill you with drugs. Talk therapy, the greatest way that we create a narrative and structure our thoughts. We have anywhere up to 60,000 thoughts in any given day. And a lot of them are fleeting and here, there, and everywhere. Talk therapy forces us to create a structured narrative of what we've gone through that clarifies within our own minds and for me, a narrative that I could make sense of and then eventually make peace with. Instead of having all these random thoughts and going, oh, this and this and this, I created a narrative, which ended up becoming the book. Which for me was the...
But going back to the mate, though, at what point... I mean, you've told him to fuck off. You're ignoring his phone calls.
Yeah, so, yeah.
At what point does he, like, not just feel like they're being a pest?
So I would answer the phone every, like, once a year. But he knew. Because when I did answer, I told him, I'm like, I would share that I'm not good. Obviously, I told him about the PTSD diagnosis. I told him about the depression. I told him about this sort of stuff, and I told him, I was like, man, you're like a trigger for me of what I'd lost. I told him this stuff, so he knew that I wasn't screening his calls because I didn't want to talk to him. I was screening his calls because I couldn't face him. Yeah, it hurt. And we all want to avoid things that hurt us. Hence why most of us don't want to see psychology or do what is right for us, because avoiding pain is what we all aspire for. But at the same time, the moment, what the pride that you'll gain out of facing yourself and facing your demons, I'm like, you can either choose to live the life that is like bowed down by your demons or your beast or whatever it is that is plaguing you, or you can suck it up for a bit, face the monster, face the beast, turn that little kayak of yours and into the storm, stop running, face it. Yeah, you may literally have a kayak facing like 34 waves. I only had a kayak when I first started. And then ever so slowly I evolved and got a bigger boat.
Well, you use the analogy of a kayak in a F5 hurricane.
Yeah. And that is what it was like. I was literally trying to tackle Mount Krakatoa volcano on my own and go, I'm going to plug you on my, like, plug it and stop it erupting on my own. I'm like, it was like, where do you begin? And I did not know where to begin, but I started. And right now, I literally see a psychologist purely to keep, because anything that comes up that is just normal in life, I'm like, I just talk it out with them. They're literally someone paid to listen to you vent shit. I'm like, it's like for them, I might have the worst moment. I'm like, fucking please take it from me and just show me some compassion. And I'll be like, oh, I can breathe again. I'm like, that's their job. Give it to them. I'm like, well, everything that happens in that room will stay in that room. It's not allowed to leave. It's confidentiality. I'm like, if you have pain, just throw it at them. That's their job, to take it.
I'd like to read an excerpt of the book that you wrote.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to ask you a question at the end of it. Over and over again, we lined the airfield for another young Aussie who had fallen, with ramp ceremonies becoming a commonplace of parade. We all stood there in a guard of honour to watch broken soldiers carry their mate to his plate to his plane ride home, draped in the Australian flag. Fuck, it's going to get me. These young men who had sworn to protect each other, slowly marching next to the casket, saying their final farewell. I could feel the pain of these soldiers, their hearts shattered at the loss of a brother, and even though I did not know them personally, I could sense the anger brewing inside me at their loss. But I did what I do best, and justified all the pain, all the suffering, and all the loss by telling myself that this is war. The past cannot be undone. What has happened, and forever will be. Regardless of the way I feel, I will wake up tomorrow and the war will continue and the next mission will push on. My mates will do their gear and so will I. I will continue to do my part and keep my mates safe, and I will sacrifice all to bring them home alive. I will not allow the pain I feel to impede my ability to do my job, and I will use any anger to perform with distinction. I will give my all, and I'm not let anything happen on my watch. That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself, by the way. I will, however, unbeknownst to me, hidden deep inside, a ferocious and unruly beast had begun to grow as my youthful innocence began to fade, and the boundaries of right and wrong and good and evil had begun to blur, and my existence was becoming nothing short of black and white for survival. It was us or them. Nothing is clear-cut about war, and doing right meant that I must do what was morally wrong. It was the task that I had been asked to perform by my nation, and to do it all with distinction meant I must defy all that I am. We returned home to Australia on the 20th of January 2011. I was just 22. The reason why I wanted to read that is because if we are civilians reaching out to people that have served, we've got no comprehension of the realities, but yet if we want to help, how do we keep reaching out and not? Sorry, did that get you?
No, yeah, it did. But that's right.
It
Go
got
on.
me
Yep.
too.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we help without feeling like we're burdening someone by talking about their issues?
The thing is, no two people will ever experience the same thing. Just like no two people will ever read the same book. Those who read my story, although they will never walk in my shoes on the battlefield and the experiences, they may have walked with me in the way that it made me feel and the repercussions of what I've been through. The way that it makes us feel, that is the universal experience. That is what you, me, and everyone can connect with. Pain is pain. Suffering is suffering. And comparison of experiences, I guess, for me is like the root of all evil. But I still remember Anzac Day 2016 when I went to a pub. I was the only special operations engineer that lived in Adelaide. So no one, I had no common experiences with other guys that had served. And I went to a pub and I sat there and in a pub full of cheers, clinking of beers and calls of joy and a footy match. There I sat with in my suit, my medals upon my chest, as though I didn't exist. A hug, or I guess was all I craved at the time, to know that I still exist. But there on a day for those who had served, standing in the middle of a group full of people, I was almost invisible. No one approached me. No one spoke to me. And for hours, I just sat there and just wallowed in the filth of my own thoughts, begging for someone to just show me that they care. There'll be times in people's lives where you're just not ready to engage in that chat. But then I'm like, there's other times when you know that person is just needing some love, and don't expect them to divulge some of their greatest traumas, and you get like the inside scoop on the worst of it. But I'm like, don't try to drag them out of the hole. I'm like, jump in there with them for a bit and just sit in the filth with them and let them help find their own way out.
But
Don't try to, but don't compare. Don't put us on a pedestal, because I'm like someone who's been through like a marriage breakdown and divorce. I can't relate to you either. But why am I allowed to talk to someone about their marriage breaking down, but you're not allowed to talk to me about my war experiences?
I think it's so from a civilian point of view, if I saw someone on Anzac Day sitting there by themselves, I would think that they wouldn't want to be approached, right? They're a complete stranger and I wouldn't want to approach them and intrude on that, potentially remembering their mates and stuff. But then how do we show that appreciation without
Intruding?
Yeah. I didn't think this conversation was going to be so emotional. Because how do we show that we care without saying, are you okay? Or, tell me about yourself, where you might see that as an intrusion, but you want to be seen. So can you see from a...
Yeah,
we're not in your head. How do we...
I know exactly where you're at, and I know the impact. But then I go at the same time, never again will I ever allow someone sitting alone suffer in silence.
Yeah.
Because all I craved was for someone to just say hello. And I can still see all the crowd just, and I'm like, obviously most people don't know what to say and they just say thank you for your service. That's pretty much where they just end up. And I'm like, I get it, I understand, because you don't know what to say and you think that that's just the easiest thing to say, and you're like, oh yeah, thank you, and I'll just smile or wave. Sometimes you go, ask them, is that, are you doing okay today? Something small. And if they try to blow you up, yeah, no dramas, mate. I just wanted to check up. I'm like, this is your day. I want to thank you. But honestly, mate, like, I'd love to have a chat if you can.
But do you think as a civilian, and this comes back to...
Takes the right person.
Okay, because I was going to say, because from a civilian point of view, that anger of you don't understand what I've been through. Why are you having this conversation with me?
And a lot of vets will go there.
Mm.
And I believe these days, like, to my core, vets don't want to go there, and there's nothing, because they blanket as like, oh, it's classified, I'm not allowed to talk about it. I'm like, bullshit. You're hiding your trauma behind the word classified, as though you can't talk about it because you don't want to face the music yourself.
Yeah, but I'm not going to have that conversation with someone on Anzac Day in a pub.
You have no idea some of the conversations I've had with people at the pub.
Yeah, but you've served. It's very different. And if you're sitting there going, I just want to be seen by the members
these
of the
days,
public.
people have asked me, and they will, and this is what I'm like, obviously I'm far more open and forward to these conversations these days, but it starts with the small question. How you doing today? I hope that it's not too painful, or I hope that you and your mates are doing okay, because you never know. Just sometimes, whenever someone asks you, one of my mates is a telltale for it. Fantastic. He comes up to me, Callum McPherson from Youngblood podcast. Like every time he comes up to me, he's like, "Hey, Bolts, how you doing?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good, mate." He's like, "Bolts, how you doing?" I'm like, "Yeah, mate, I'm all right." He's like, "Bolts, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Man, I'm fucked." I'm like, "I'm so sad." And he's like, "There we go." and I'm like, and he knows now to ask me the question 3 times, because he knows he's going to get the false one, the first one. The second one is going to be this sort of like intermediary. And the third one will be like, "Man, yeah, I'm not doing too good." And that's where it's like, you can't, you do that with mates per se, but then other people, like, you ask her, "How you doing? Hope you're doing okay. Hope your mates are doing well," and all that. And it's only that you ask enough questions. If you can feel that they do not want to go there, obviously don't push them. But if you can feel that they're like lingering, and they want to, and you have the ability to engage in that conversation. If you don't know what you're doing and you're going to have some unsolicited opinion about stuff, I'm like, be very careful, because trauma is not always rational. And what they say may not always make sense, but they're trying to make sense of it themselves. And for anyone, your goal is not to, we all have the ability to solve our own problems. The goal is to keep them talking long enough so they can solve their own. And that's where just keep them talking. And then, but as soon as you feel them obviously trying to wrap it up, like, "Yeah, mate, it was an absolute pleasure. Like, nice meeting you." Don't sit there and linger. Like, move on. Like, they're wanting you to move on, but it's like, yeah, I guess if you're not sure, always start with the "thank you for your service" if you're never not sure. But then just ask them, like, "How you doing?" Just like anybody else, and see what the response is. I'm like, because we are just ordinary people. I'm just an ordinary bloke who sometimes who at one point in their life were tasked to do extraordinary things. But I guess my pain is no different to your pain. And for that is something that we can share. And let's bond over the darkness and the despair rather than the experiences themselves. Because if you tell me that you've had a really shit day, and then I'll be like, "Oh, really? Like, what happened?" And then I'll tell you about my shit day. And I'm like, and it's like what Alan de Botton once did in a conference. I watched it. It was the most, like, I wasn't there. I watched on YouTube. And he goes, "All right, I want you to turn." He talked to the whole group. He said, "I want you to turn and speak to the person next to you about something you've achieved and a success that you've made and that you've done. Go turn to the person next to you and tell you something." You hear everyone go, "Oh yeah, I'm this, and I've achieved and succeeded in this," and the conversation fizzled within like 30 seconds. And he goes, "Now I want you to turn to that person and say, tell me something you regret, tell me something that you're sad about, and now tell me something you're ashamed of." And he goes, "Go talk to the person next to you." For 5 minutes, he could not get the audience back. We all want to divulge the skeletons in our closet, but we're always so afraid to be the first person to do it. We connect through our suffering and our pain. Hence why the Buddhist noble truth is life is suffering. It's like, stop fighting the fact that life is suffering and use it as a tool in order to be closer and more connected to those that you love and care about. Or even Be supportive of those who you do not know. We all, well, majority of us want to share the pain that we hold within, but we're too afraid that we're going to be judged for doing so. And I guess for that book, writing that book, that's when I just said, I don't, sorry my language, give a fuck anymore about how people are going to perceive me and how people are going to judge me. This is my life. These are the mistakes I made. These are the experiences that I went through. Sorry, the dog just walked in. And in the end, I'm like, this is who I am.
You work a lot now with veterans and mental health, Bolton's group. You have now resigned your position on the suicide prevention boards and stuff, but you were very involved in that.
Yep.
What do you think that, I mean, we've talked about, okay, Anzac Day, but what, and approaching people and checking in on them repeatedly and not taking no for an answer, so to speak. We can be you've given us permission to be the pest if we're concerned about somebody.
Yeah, but within reason, like read their body language. If they're like sharp nose, like obviously go, oh, this person doesn't.
No, I meant on the phone, like if we're
on the phone. Yeah. Because it's not about answering. It's about knowing that the person's there. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think that, I mean, you've reached out, you got to a dark point, you reached out for help, you continue to reach out for help until you found someone that you gel with from a therapist point of view. What do you think that would help service people now when they're exiting out of the military? Do you think it should be a mandatory weekly year therapy session that the military sets up post-service? Like what can we do to help people exiting out of that transition? Because you talk about leaving that brotherhood and having no purpose.
And that's where I believe that obviously the biggest problem for a lot of veterans, officers a bit different. They have tertiary studies behind, to be an officer in the military, they have tertiary studies behind them, and there's job opportunities for them everywhere. No. It is the common folk like myself, the enlisted soldier, I guess the runts of the litter.
Well, you refused promotions. You put that in the
but I was a man on the tools. I didn't want to be a desktop warrior. I couldn't sit there and put together like risk assessments and all that sort of stuff. I hated admin.
Helicopter faces this way on the PowerPoint.
100%, yeah. 100%. I was like, nah. And I'm like, but I look now, I'm like, man, it would have been good to have had a promotion because it obviously would have looked good on a resume. A lot of soldiers do not know how to do not know how to describe their skill sets because our job was to speak through our actions. We do not talk about doing. Civilian world, what I learned very quickly was full of intention, which is something that really got to me in those early days because you can ask someone to do something, they wouldn't do it. Whereas in the military, you ask someone to do something, you do it because the chances are you'd be charged if you didn't. It's a very different world. And so when you're supporting vets, just know that they may not best be able to describe themselves and what they can do, but they have learned a bucket load in the way of discipline, urgency, self-motivated, self-starters, and being able to work in high-risk environments or high-stress situations. What do I believe needs to happen? I believe that every soldier is willing to, or every civilian wanting to be a soldier is willing to undergo what is necessary to become a soldier. And they whatever you want to word it, they call it brainwashing for simply. It's not brainwashing.
They program you to.
They program you. They break you down from your civilian individualistic mindset and rebuild you back up to see yourself as one of a greater whole, a cog of a giant machine where you think about those around you rather than acting only for yourself. There is a word in the military called, if you get called it is like the greatest insult. And that is, if you get called Jack in the military, it is like the greatest insult. That means you abandon the team and you thought purely for yourself, which is one of the most detested sort of acts that can happen in the military.
But that's the rest of the society mindset.
That is the rest of the world.
So how do you then unprogram that mentality to allow you back into civilian life?
Ask any soldier now after they've done all their. A lot of soldiers now may not have done tours, and that's where you have to understand. Like there is an era there of soldiers who have done like operational services. Now a lot of soldiers who have not, and so it's not always trauma. It's not always going to be bad. It's just like the era between Vietnam and Afghanistan and Iraq. I'm like, there's a big gap there where a lot of soldiers don't even want to call themselves veterans because because they haven't done operational service. They don't believe they have earned the title. But I believe that soldiers should be tethered to their military roots. Because you ask any soldier to now, I'm going to teach you how to convert back into a civilian. I can tell you right now, I would have told you to go shut it. I'm like, I'm not. You can't teach me how to be a person again. I already am a person. You don't realize the gravity of the changes that you've undertaken in order to be a functional member of the military institution. And which has a lot of good steps, a lot of perks, but then I believe soldiers need to be tethered on the other side where they are still under ADF control, but 2 to 3 days a week they are let go to perform outside employment to try to find different jobs, different trades, different services, or whatever it is, where they can go work 2 days a week, maybe 3 days a week, to step foot back into that world, and then the other 2-3 days to come back to their unit around their mates going, oh my God, like this place is, civilian world is like absolutely like just lost the plot. Because in comparison to military world, it would feel that way. Like in the military, you're segregated. There's us and them. We call the rest of the society civvies or civilians. Like we literally have segregated ourselves from the rest of society. And so allowing them to slowly dab their foot back into that world, back and forth, they'll slowly begin to shift that mentality and find somewhere where they can find new purpose, new meaning, new friendships will be forged, and then they'll be able to take that step out far more effectively, productively, and with a lot less, I guess, a lot smaller hole when it comes to their losing of identity.
What do you think the reality is for achieving that?
Well, anything that's military is like, or government in itself is, it's just a whole lot of talking and
yeah.
I'm like,
we need to get some stronger politicians to help push that agenda.
Yeah, and that's where I'm like, it's just all talk, and even like our head shed, I'm like, there's try something different.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing isn't working.
Yeah.
And I'm like, for me, this seems so simple. Like, yeah, you might have to hold on to a soldier for an extra 12 months of financially, and which can be burdensome on the government and the taxpayer dollars, but at the same time,
what's more burdensome than having like,
or a lifetime of losing themselves, losing their identity, and being on a gold card or on a white card for the rest of their life because they completely lost themselves upon discharge.
100%.
And I'm like, but joining the military, I look back now, I'm like, yes, there's all the whole Royal Commission and veteran suicide, and there is a lot of flaws, but the whole military should be used as a great stepping stone, a great experience where you get to learn about yourself, learn about, meet other people, learn other ways, learn how to be self-disciplined, self-started.
The thing that's also lost a lot on I would say the higher brass or the politicians is that we've got a recruitment issue in terms of the ADF now, but part of it is because how they've seen how they treated veterans when they're exiting as well. If you fix that, then you're going to have a better retention issue and an attraction issue.
Yeah, well, right now our entire head brass slapped us all in the face saying you're all guilty of being cold-blooded killers.
Yeah, it's awful.
Who the hell wants to join an organization where the leader of culture is just slaps his men around, men and women around. I'm like, he had it all. He did it all wrong. I'm like, he should have taken accountability, going, oh my gosh, like in the end, we missed this. And I'm going, some of these guys, especially in the SF, did in excess of 10 tours. I'm like, I saw the impact of doing 2 tours, and I know the impact it had on my life and my existence. I'm like, let alone some of these guys did 10. I'm like, they'd seen more death and destruction than most of us would see in multiple lifetimes.
But well, it makes me angry, so I could only imagine how it makes you guys feel.
Yeah, and I'm like, what? You guys abused us. We obviously were willing participants to go, because I can tell you, after my second tour, I was like, send me back, because I don't belong here. I don't belong in Australia.
Are we getting into the politics that we said that we were going to get into?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. But I was like, I felt like I belonged on the battlefield.
Yeah, because that's where you're accepted, because you're
exactly, and that's where I had purpose, meaning.
Yeah,
and that it was in the peak of sadness. That's a coin of my family and all of that. So, yeah, when I was mad sad, in the peak of my depression, I remember I couldn't speak to my mum for years. All communication had to go through my dad.
Why? You didn't put that in the book.
No.
But I did notice you talked about her a lot at the start of your military, and then you just stopped talking about her in the book.
I did. At the time, she created I don't know what it was. I could communicate with dad, but not with mum. And I think it was. Yeah, I actually really don't know.
Do you think it's because you were almost trying to protect her and yourself, because she was the more emotionally available, and therefore you didn't want to sort of open that Pandora's box?
Well, obviously I didn't want to burden her with obviously what I'd been through and what I had done. But then that's when I did say to her once was, well, the only reason I was an engineer is because you chose it.
Oh.
Yeah. I was pretty angry and pretty sad back then. And then she goes, yeah, well, the only time that you were ever home was when you were in Afghanistan. I never knew what that meant until later on in life, when I realized it's because I had purpose, meaning that I was emotionally available to my mother and my family. And now that I'd on the other side of PTSD, depression, I was like numb. I'd completely shut down from the world. There was a period there where I was obviously using I'd been put on antidepressants to the point where I couldn't even piece a sentence together. It was brutal, and I'm just slurring all over the place. And then that's when I let go. I was just like, the military's taking my body. I'm like, you're not taking my mind. And so I was like, I'm not going to mask this. I'm going to face this. That was my own personal choice. So I'm like, antidepressants work for some people. For me, I was like, I'm not going to mask. If I want to get through this, I have to face it
and feel it.
Yeah, rather than going, oh wow, like there I am in my kayak, and I think the storm is literally just like a nice small little day, and pretend the waves are small. I want to see that the waves are 30 footers. I don't want to pretend that there's something else.
I do want to put in here that we're not antidepressants.
I'm not. No.
Medical intervention.
If it works 100%. For you, please do it. But don't expect everyone to see it for the same light as you do. It works for some, it doesn't work for others, and that's all it is. If you have a benefit, do not stop now.
Where are you at now with your family?
Yeah, so new house, hence the technical issues, and I couldn't find a. So I got a new home.
I was so happy. You wrote about so many partners, because obviously this is the girl part, right, coming out in me. Because I'm like, you wrote about all these partners and all these like disastrous, couldn't share my emotions situation, and then there's one line in the book at the very end. I've got a new partner and a bub on the way, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, literally, because like we had met about a year ago, and that was like literally after I'd written the book, and it was
Oh,
they'd came back, the book had come back from the editors, and I'm like, I want to include this because I'm like,
yeah.
I'm a happy man. I'm like
Happy,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I want to tell people, I'm like, nah, life's good. I'm like,
there's light at the
I
end of the tunnel, man. Yeah.
I had walked through the darkness. I
Yeah.
had, and there's a lot of times along the way where I'd stopped walking and I didn't know, and I was like, oh man, and I thought it was a cave. I forgot that it was a tunnel. I just thought literally I was walking into darkness for the rest of my life. But here I am now going, no, it's not. I did a depression test, and I scored like 2 out of like, I don't know, 60 or whatever it comes out to. And PTSD are pretty much like 1 or 2.
Wow.
Whereas when I was first diagnosed, it was any score over like 25 to 28 usually
You were an
implies that you're
HD
suffering.
student on those tests then.
100%. I scored 64. So, and I thought I was doing all right. But it's yeah, if I can do it, and this is the thing, I am an ordinary bloke who had zero understanding about any of this, any emotional literacy. I am just a special, weird, odd unit.
Nathan, you didn't answer the question.
What's the question? Oh my God.
How's things with your family now?
Fantastic. It is wicked.
So you've got a good relationship with your mum?
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah,
Good.
mum is great. Like mum, dad. I'm like, and then my partner got the bubbies due in about 6 weeks, I think, like that. So, I am super excited to start a whole new chapter in my life and close the old. But the old chapter is obviously something I'm very passionate about.
Yeah.
But
I've got 2 questions to close off.
yeah.
First question, what would be, given the path that you've walked and the roles that you've had within mental health, and what you see now in terms of the veteran community, what would be the one bit of advice that you say to veterans that are struggling?
How is it? Quite. I've actually got on the wall behind me. Oh.
I can't see it. My eyesight's not that good, Nathan.
No. That's the one with the soldier with the big shield there. Epic.
Okay.
There is nothing stronger than a broken man who has rebuilt himself.
Yeah.
I let go of protecting all that you were. Realize that all that you currently are, if it was working, you wouldn't still be struggling. Try something new.
It's the definition of insanity, isn't it?
Yeah, doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. Try something different. I'm like, what have you got to lose? Dude, you can give it a shot in the short term, and who knows? You may end up living the rest of your life far more free. Don't get me wrong, the scars will always be there. But for me personally, although the scars are always there, they no longer define me. It's like the beach ball analogy that I use, which is I spent years trying to hold the beach ball underwater. And now it's like all my pain, all my suffering, I tried to hold underwater. I used so much energy and so much effort to try to hold it under. I had no time for anything else, hence becoming a victim mentality. You only see yourself because you're using everything just to protect yourself from yourself. Whereas finally I got off the beach ball and let it float around next to me. And it's all there as it. And I can access it when I want to access it. I can use some of its information, but no longer does it consume all that I am.
The last question is,
Sure.
what can us civvies do to help you guys? What should we know?
Oh, what should
it's a very broad and loaded question, David.
That is a huge question.
Come on. I won't say the fate of all veterans, relies on this answer, but it's pretty...
If you're an employer, give us a chance.
Yep.
We're not all broken. And those who are suffering, yeah, we may have our demons, but I can tell you we're also extremely productive.
Mm. That team mentality, isn't it?
Go to some of those defense networking things. Reach out to some of these bigger organizations like Open Arms or RSL and let them know that you are an organization or a business that wants to support veterans. And so they can, because obviously, if you're a little organization, how do we find you? I'm like, put yourself out there in the greater, bigger network and let us find you. Especially if you're going to obviously give us a little bit of extra support, especially in those early days as we transition. Give us a chance, because I can tell you right now, although I do have experiences where I've obviously let down an organization, in general, I'm like, we are very astute model of individual.
Mm.
So,
reach out to help, everybody. If you're struggling for mental health issues, please speak to your GP and a licensed psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist, lifeline, whatever you need to do.
yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Nathan.
All right, thank you so much. Amazing chat, and thanks everyone. You're all a bunch of legends. Cheers. Thanks, Fiona.
The One Moment Please podcast.
Yeah.